This is part two of our first class lecture. And so consider what we just had a break. So I was explaining to you in the last lecture that there were essentially three categories of ethical theory. Consequentialism, which goes by the name of teleological, telos, which we get telephone, telescope, which you look way out into the distance. So teleological means the ends. So in consequentialism, you consider the consequences or the ends of your actions. And three of the examples that I gave you of ethical theories that fit under consequentialism are egoism, everything is about me. Utility, where you look for the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So what is best for the most? And then the final one is social contract theory. And social contract theory, it is a reciprocal relationship where I do this, you do that. And I gave you the example of walking on the correct side of the street wearing deodorant. But it also applies to more to ethical, moral issues as well. You can sometimes figure out ways to apply that. So then I gave you the second category of ethical theories, which we called non-consequentialism. So if in consequentialism you look at the ends, you look at the results, in non-consequentialism you do not consider the end, you do not consider the results. Rather, it's sometimes called deontological. And that is another way of saying, what is my duty? You will do your duty regardless of the consequences. I will do what I am supposed to do regardless of who it hurts. So the examples of the theories I gave you for that were divine command theory, in which case you do it because God commands it. But then there is the dilemma of, does God command it because it's right, or is it right because God commands it? So in there you have a dilemma that you have to deal with. A couple of the others is natural law. You look at what is the natural thing to do. And in the natural thing, you don't interfere, you don't contravene in nature, but you follow nature. And then finally, I gave you the example of Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, or sometimes just called Kantianism. And in Kantianism, Kant had he was trying to detach morality and ethics from any religious consideration. And so in doing that, he had formulated what is called the categorical imperative. And in short, it is this: act only in such a way that you would want your action to become a universal law. Act only in such a way that you would want your action to become a universal law. So if you're going to steal, remember I used the example of office supplies, and you want it to be a universal law, anybody can steal any office supplies, anywhere, anytime, from anyone, then go ahead and steal it. But if you say, no, stealing is wrong, so don't even steal something as simple as office supplies, because you would never want it to be a law that anybody can steal from anybody, anytime, anywhere. So no theft. Same thing with lying. Unless you're willing to make a law that anybody can lie to anyone, anywhere, under any circumstances, then you cannot tell a lie, even to a murderer, to save your friend. So unless you want it to be a universal law, don't do it. If there's any question about it, don't do it. So Kant's categorical imperative was act in only such a way that you would want your action to become a universal law. So that's the first two categories: consequentialism, non-consequentialism. Now this third category, as I had laid out, is what I call the alternatives. And under the alternatives, we have two. And they are somewhat similar, but they don't fit within these first two categories of consequences or non-consequences, or considering the end versus doing your duty. This third category, we have two, and the first one is called Aristotelianism, from Aristotle, who was Plato's student, and it's sometimes referred to as virtue ethics. Another way that it's categorized is to call it eudaimonia. Eudaimonia. That's a Greek word. And there's no real good translation for it other than just to say it's living the appropriate life, living a right kind of life. And so in Aristotle's virtue ethics, the way that you achieve morality is you find a balance between extremes. And so I'm going to put up I'm going to give you a chart to look at. So to give you an example of what it's going to look like, it's going to look something like this, and it's going to be uploaded to Canvas. I haven't uploaded this one yet. I don't think I have. I have to look and see. But this balance that Aristotle would have us achieve is called the golden mean. The golden mean. And so what he would say is the balance. Let's just take one example. The balance of courage is courage itself. Now, what are the two extremes of courage? If you have too much courage, you're considered to be rash. So rather than being a smart fireman, you don't even consider the building, you just rush in, consequences be damned, and you do your duty and you don't even think about it. Well, that's not very smart. On the other hand, you're a firefighter and you see the burning building and you say, oh, hell no, I'm not going in there. And they say, but you're a firefighter, there's someone dying in there. And you're like, you know what, I'm just here for the paycheck. Hell no. Aristotle would say that neither of those extremes, rashness or cowardice, is appropriate. The balance is courage, to be courageous. You consider the consequences, you know your duty, and you balance those that you are courageous. I'll give you another example, and that's when it comes to money. So Aristotle would say that the appropriate moral way to live would be to be generous. Now, what does it mean to be generous? Or not generous? And Aristotle would say, look at two extremes. If you're overly generous, you are extravagant. You just spend money, you throw away money, you don't even consider money. What's money? Forget about it. And so when the bill collector comes, you have nothing. On the other extreme of generosity, you have somebody who's completely stingy. Miserly, we might call it. And so every time you're out with your friends and the bill comes for the drinks, you've got to go to the bathroom because you're not paying. Or when it's your turn to buy a round, you're like, oh, guys, look at the time. I got to go. And you don't share in that. So you're not very generous. So Aristotle would say that you're neither stingy nor extravagant. That true golden mean is somewhere in the middle of that, is with generosity. I'll use one more example, and that's of justice. So when Aristotle would look at justice, he would say justice is an ideal that we should strive for. Now, what are the extremes then of justice? On the one hand, you have complete selflessness. You just forget about yourself, throw yourself away, don't even consider it. On the other extreme, you're very selfish. It's all about you and only about you. And Aristotle would say that neither of those extremes, selflessness nor selfishness, is a very just moral way to live. You have to find a balance between those two. And that's what Aristotle would encourage us to do with the golden mean. And Aristotle really believed that you should find people who live this way, people who have lived this life. And that's why he called it eudaimonia. It's sometimes translated as the good life, not as the good life as in, hey, I've got it made. No, the good life is those who have lived a moral life, and you should follow that person's example, and you should practice, do exactly what they did, finding that golden mean, and you too will achieve that moral, virtuous life that you're longing for. Okay, so that's one of the alternatives. The other one is called care ethics. Care ethics was devised in the 60s, 70s by a woman named Carol Gilligan at Harvard. It's a feminist ethic. Now, that doesn't mean that only women can apply this. It is a feminist approach. And the way Carol Gilligan came about this is she was studying all of this, all these ethical theories and things like that, and how we develop morally. And she came to the conclusion, all these were developed by men. Kant is saying a categorical imperative, and John Stuart Mill was formulating utility, and Aristotle with his virtue ethics, and natural law coming out of Roman Catholicism to some extent, divine command. And she said, women approach things a little bit differently. Women don't approach with this black and white, this is what you must do. There's a more nuanced, subtle way to approach this, in which you take in the whole of the person, the whole of the environment, the whole of the situation. And from that, then, you make a decision about what is right. And sometimes it's what is right then is different for each person. And so to think then carefully about what would be right for the entire system, taking into account the individual, that would be care ethics. It's a much more nuanced, subtle, and you might even say it's somewhat situational, because what is right in this situation might not be the right thing in the next situation. And so she developed this system called care ethics. I will upload, in fact, let me make myself a note, upload that, and she wrote a book called In a Different Voice, and so I will be sure those are uploaded for you. So now we've got these three broad categories: consequentialism, non-consequentialism, and an alternative. So we've got these three broad categories. And again, I do have a clip or two up there for you that explains these a little bit more. So, and I will review these. You'll be sick of them in the first 2 or 3 weeks as I talk about these. So that's as far as I'm going to go on these for right now. So in fact, I want to stop that, shift gears, and go to your syllabus and what's expected in this class. So I have uploaded for you a copy of your syllabus. I've also posted it under syllabus, so you can see what is expected for this class. There are 2 textbooks, and yes, you will need them. There is reading in both of them. And so the first one, I tried to get these very inexpensive. You can buy them or you can probably rent them, but they're not going to be expensive. The first one is Ethics 101. It's by Brian Boone. I know it's probably backwards in what you're seeing. This talks about some of the theories that I laid out, and in the latter chapters also has some discussion of some of the topics that we will cover. We're not going to go too deeply into a lot of this book, but there are some pages. When you see it listed on the syllabus, it's listed as as Boone, and it lists the pages there. So you will need this one. A used one is perfectly fine. You don't need a new one or anything like that. And this is also something that's probably good for you to just hold on to and keep. It's a reference for you for years to come. The other one is a Stone Reader, Modern Ethics in 77 Arguments. This is my copy here. It's by Peter Catapano and Simon Kreitschli. I might be saying those names wrong. They are the editors of this, and so it is a series of essays that discuss some of the topics that we will be addressing in this class. Yes, it is required. When you see this on the syllabus, it is listed as C and C for the 2 last names of the editors, and it tells you what pages to read in this. So let me just read you the introduction of this. I know you can read, but it doesn't mean you necessarily will. So let me read this. This course is intended to acquaint the student with basic ethical theories and the exercise of applying those theories to current moral and social issues. This involves the discussion of moral problems, issues, controversies, and questions. Topics will include abortion, euthanasia, the death penalty, and other punishments, sexual immorality, pornography, censorship, discrimination on the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, national origin, environmental uses and abuses, animal rights, business practices, gun rights, patriotism, and other issues. We will generally question right, wrong, virtue, vice, and how we arrive at our own beliefs. Inevitably, disagreements will arise. It is expected that the student will conduct herself in a mature and respectful manner. Now, we're not in class, but this still applies. Rudeness, name-calling, and other disregard for the dignity of another person is intolerable. We can and we will disagree respectfully. Furthermore, it is expected that you challenge your beliefs regarding the issues discussed. However, open-mindedness is a must. It is not expected that you change your beliefs regarding any issues. So listen carefully and ask yourself. Now, attendance. Because this is an online course, how am I going to take attendance? Well, this is what's wonderful. There are certain analytics that I can see when you log on and how much time you spend on any given week. And yes, I will be checking that. And yes, that's how I'll know if you're participating. And whereas I can't necessarily do the attendance in a regular way, I can look at the analytics and see if you have engaged with the material. So if you're enrolled and you never click on any of the links, or if you click on the video and turn it right off, well, then I can see that. For that matter, you can turn it on and walk away from it. I will not know that. But I can see whether or not you engage. Class participation will be gauged in just that way. Also, if you miss a week doing this, it will affect you. And we're very fortunate in that your classes are recorded. They're not actual live Zoom. And so you can go back and watch something that you missed. But I will be checking the analytics on a weekly basis. So I would encourage you to keep up with things in the class. Now, the assignments. Okay. So if you look here, you will see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things on which you will be graded, generally speaking. So let me explain them a little bit. And please do note the due dates, because there's no reason why you can't make the due dates. So, and I do want the work emailed to me, not, I'll probably put up a way for you to submit it in Canvas, but I want it emailed because I do keep records for longer than what Canvas allows. So you will have 6 one-page reflection papers. I used to do 3 2-page, but now I'm going to do 6 one-page reflection papers. So that's pretty much a paper due every other week. And in a couple of cases, it's due 2 weeks in a row. But it's not daunting. You have a whole week to write a reflection paper. So what I'm asking you to do is to look on the syllabus, pages 3, 4, and 5. When you print it out, I would encourage you to print it out. This is our contract of working together. And what I would encourage you to do is to print it out and to look through this list of all of these topics. I mentioned them in the first half of this lecture. So look through all these topics and choose 6 of them that interest you. And then what I'll need you to do is next week, you will send me your 6 topics so that I will look and I will see that you have looked at 6 topics on which you want to write a reflection paper, a one-page reflection paper. Okay? Now your reflection paper, you should, if you use a source, you should cite a source. Don't risk plagiarism. Plagiarism is when you use someone else's work and don't give them credit. So please don't plagiarize. So the 6 should be typed, double-spaced, 12-point font, paying attention to grammar, spelling, style, appropriate annotation if you cite someone. And then please read it, and then reread it. And here's what I always tell my classes. The simpler you can put something, the better. You're not a professional philosopher. This is an intro moral course at a community college. Most of people in my class are not going to be philosophers. They're not going to go on and study philosophy. You're probably in here for something else. So if you can put it in simple terms, don't try to use large philosophical terms. Don't try to use large ethical terms. Just put it as simply as you can. And here's what I always tell my students. In addition to putting it simply, if you can say, in other words, then use the other words. So if you read a sentence and you say, well, what I'm really trying to say is, or you read a sentence and you say, in other words, then you probably need to take out that first sentence and use the other words. I hope that makes sense to you. So, of your 6 reflection papers, 6, okay, one of them will become your masterpiece. Your masterpiece. So let's just say you look through this list and you want to talk about cannibalism. Oh, this topic just interests me to no end. So you write a one-page reflection paper and you're like, oh God, I could talk about cannibalism all day long. Okay, then maybe cannibalism then becomes the topic on which you'll write a little bit more. And that will become the topic for your final paper. That becomes the topic for your annotated bibliography. And that becomes a topic for your presentation. Got it? So you 6 topics. You will then focus in on one. You're still going to write 6 reflection papers, 6 one-page reflection papers. But out of those 6, one of them is going to become your masterpiece for the semester. This is easy if you follow my instructions. Whatever you wrote in that one paper, it's incorporated into your final paper. So whereas you need 8 to 10 pages, now you need 9. Now, probably your reflection is not as well written as the whole 9-page paper will be, but at least you've got a start on it. In addition to that, all the resources that you plan to use to talk about cannibalism, well, that goes into your annotated bibliography. And I will talk about how to do an annotated bibliography. I'll give you an example of that later. So 6 one-page papers, one longer final paper topic. I explain here what the reflection paper and the final papers should look like and include, how I will evaluate it. Now, using sources. We're going to have to be using a lot of web-based sources. I realize that. And an annotated bibliography is a list of all the sources you find on the web. Now, journals, web-based periodicals, those can go into your annotated bibliography. Again, don't be caught up on the words right now. I'll explain it. But if you have... you're supposed to have 8 to 12 sources. So let's just say you're going to have 10 sources in your annotated bibliography. By the way, this annotated bibliography, it becomes the works cited or bibliography for your final paper. You can add to it, but you would ideally draw from it. See, I'm trying to build on each other. The one reflection paper is going to become your annotated bibliography, and what you put in your annotated is going to inform your final paper. Your final paper is going to be how you do your class presentation, or your presentation to me. So of your resources, the majority of them should be .org, .edu, or .gov. It should not be .com. If you have 10 sources that are .edu, .org, .gov, then you can have as many sources that are .com after that as you want. But you need to have 8 to 10 at least that are .org, .edu, and .gov. Then you can fill it up with, timemagazine.com. Then you can fill it up with, an episode of southpark.com or something, whatever. But the majority of them, the initial number of them, has to be from a .edu, .org, or .gov. There will be a final terminology exam. I was very surprised by this last semester. I thought everyone would make a perfect grade on the terminology final. They didn't. I had people fail it. I don't know how, because you've got the damn book right there. You have the terms all semester. You can look it up for all I care while you're taking the exam. I can't stop you. But there will be a final exam. This is where you can, if you haven't done well all semester, you can really knock it out of the park, and you can really do well in that final exam and bring your grade up. Now, as I mentioned before, do not plagiarize, do not plagiarize, do not plagiarize. If you're not sure what plagiarism is, look it up, have somebody explain it to you, but don't do it. Because I will fail you for that assignment if I catch you, and I reserve the right to fail you for the course. Don't plagiarize. I'm easy to get along with, easy to do the work for, but don't plagiarize. And don't risk it. Look, my first teaching assignment, I was a teaching assistant in a class of 200. I caught 5 students plagiarizing. Don't risk it. Okay? If you need accommodations, it is your responsibility to let me know. If you need extra time for something, it's your responsibility to let me know. Now, let me talk about how I'm going to grade you. Let me grab a piece of paper right here. I didn't anticipate doing it quite this way, but this is probably the easiest thing to do. So let me grab a piece of paper, and I'll explain how I'm going to grade you. There we go. So you're going to have, again, 6 categories on which you will be graded. All right, 6 categories. You're going to have 6 one-page papers. They count 5 points each for a total of 30 points. The grade you're going to get back is a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on your paper. A well-done reflection paper is worth 5 points. So let's just do it this way. Let's say on your reflection papers, the first one you score 5. You drop a good bit on the second one, 3 points. But you pull it out on the third one, 4. Your fourth one, again, knock it out of the park with a 5. Your fifth one, you decided, to hell with it, I'm not doing it. That's a 0. And your sixth one, you're like, okay, I'm going to do it, but it's not the best. You're back at a 3. Now, out of 30 potential points for reflection papers, how many, if you were adding this up with me, you've got 8, 12, 17, that's 20 points out of 30. So put down 20. Now it comes to your annotated bibliography. Okay? Your annotated bibliography is worth 15 points. You're a good student. You follow my instructions on this. And so you do fairly well. So you end up with a 14 out of 15 on your annotated bibliography. Now, you've got a presentation on your final paper topic. So you make the appointment at the appropriate time. You come on, you give me a 5-minute presentation on your topic. I'm like, good job. All right, well done. All right, so there you get 10 points for your presentation. Your final paper is pretty good, but you could do better, but you got a 22 on it. So that's 22 out of 25 points. Terminology exam, you blew it. Totally blew it. 20 questions worth half a point each. You only got half of them. So you got a 5 on your final exam. However, you have been engaged with the material the whole semester. I look at the analytics. You've engaged with everyone throughout the semester. So class participation, I like you. I like the way you've engaged. I like what you've written. So I know it says 10 points, but I'm going to give you 11. That's my discretion. Class participation. By the way, it's not just whether I like you or not. It's that you've done the work. So let's add up your grade for the semester. So out of 6 one-page reflection papers, you've got 20 points. On your annotated bibliography, you've got 14 points. On your presentation, you got 10 points. On your final paper, you got 22 points. On your terminology exam, you didn't do so well, you got 5 points. But on your class participation, I had sympathy on you. I gave you an extra point. Now you have an 82 for the class. I don't know if you can see this. Here are your individual reflection papers, all 6 of them. Here's your annotated bibliography. Here is your presentation, final paper, final exam, class participation. That equals an 82. That's a B. I don't trick you by giving you letter grades so that you don't know what they mean. I don't trick you by saying, okay, on your reflection paper, you got a 99. No, because then you have to convert that in some way to points and all of that. No. The point you earn is the point that will be added to your grade. The ultimate goal is 100 points. you don't do any of the work, you get no points. If you do half the work, you get 50 points. That way, you know what your grade is as you turn in stuff. It's entered in the system. The only thing you won't know on the last day of class is your class participation grade, because I reserve the right to give you an extra point if you need it. So if you have a 79, 1 extra point would give you a B. I'll give it to you if you've participated in class. Okay? Good. All right. So the course. The readings are on the syllabus along with the due dates for everything. They're also entered in Canvas. So I encourage you to look at that. I will be back in a moment with a third portion of this lecture. Okay?